Hi, a warm welcome to everyone to this Zoom event where we are celebrating the launch of MANAM, a novel by Rima Elkouri. Here is the book. I'm Nurjahan Aziz, publisher at Moenzi House Publishers and proud publishers of this book in English translation. We are going to have a conversation during this event with Rima Elkouri, the author, the translators Phyllis Aronoff and Howard Scott, and the moderator Katia Grubisic. In a few minutes, I will introduce them all, but in the meantime, I would first like to begin with some acknowledgements. So I would like to first acknowledge the land on which we live and work is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Innu, and Métis. We also acknowledge that Toronto, where we are based, is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. And our publishing program is supported by Canada Council for the Arts, the Ontario Arts Council, and the Government of Canada through the Canada Book Fund. We are grateful to all of them for their generosity. For our event this evening, our grateful thanks to Paragraph Books in Montreal for their support in promoting the book, and to Katia Grubisic for her time and expertise in moderating this event. Our event then is going to be, the conversation will touch on topics of literary translation, themes of exile, displacement, return, home, among other points of discussion. So I would like to begin then by introducing the four people, the discussants, and I will begin with Rima Elkouri herself, who is the author. Rima is a journalist and columnist for La Presse and lives in Montreal. She is a winner of the Jules Fournier Prize of the Superior Council of the French language. MANAM is her first novel, and I think there should be many more to come. Phyllis Aronoff, one of the two translators, translates fiction, nonfiction, and poetry from French to English, solo or with co-translator Howard Scott. Howard Scott translates poetry, fiction, and nonfiction, often with co-translator Phyllis Aronoff. Together, they have translated 3 titles for Moenzi House: Descent into Night by Edem Aoumi, for which they won the Governor General's Award for Translation in 2018. Mina Among the Shadows, also by Edem Aoumi, and now MANAM by Rima Elkouri. Katia Grubisic is a writer, editor, and translator. Her work has won the Gerald Lampert Award and been shortlisted for the A.M. Klein Prize and the Governor General's Award for Translation. So I would like to turn it over to Katia now. Take over with the session.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nurjahan. Thank you to Moenzi House for having us all together tonight. And thank you also for Crystal, who's done so much work behind the scenes to make sure we're all organized and online when we're supposed to be and in the right place. I think this will be a great event. Thank you all so much for coming. There are a number of people here, and so not everybody is on my screen, but will be available for questions from the audience toward the end of the conversation, so around 7:30 or so. However, if you have questions that you'd like to place either in the chat as we go, feel free to type them into the chat, and I'll try to keep track of what's going on there. If you'd like also to raise your hand, if you go down to the little reaction button at the bottom of the screen, and you click on that, there's a raise hand option, and I'll try to keep track of who's raising their virtual hand. So if I don't see you, feel free to wave frantically. And otherwise, of course, we invite you to keep your camera off if you'd like, and at least your microphone, so we're not having keyboard sounds or children screaming in the back, which I apologize for in advance if that happens on my end. So Nurjahan has done a wonderful job in introducing one of our most well-known and best-loved columnists here in Montreal for La Presse, and also two of the most highly respected literary translators in Canada who've been working for, I think, over 30 years, if I'm not mistaken, and who've done such a range of work. And we're really lucky to have all three of them here tonight. The conversation will happen mostly in English, but if anybody has questions in French, feel free to post them as well, and we can absolutely field those. Or I suppose in Arabic, though my Arabic is pretty limited to profanities and ordering
Mine
chicken.
too.
So in any case, we'll try to do our best to accommodate all the conversations that will happen. Feel free to behave like this is a real book launch. So I wondered if we could begin actually by asking Rima, perhaps, if you could summarize the novel for us, just very briefly, without giving anything away, of course, but just to give us a sense of what the book is about and who the characters are and what you were hoping to explore for those of us in the audience who haven't read it yet, perhaps to give them a taste.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Katia. Well, so this novel, Manam, it's the story of a quest. It's a quest for hope, I would say, hope in a hopeless world. So it's the quest of Leah, who's a teacher in Montreal, and she's the granddaughter of Armenian genocide survivors. And when her beloved grandmother, her Téta, dies, she's haunted by her memory, by her story, her silences, because even though her grandmother, who's a Armenian genocide survivor, was a very talkative person, she would never say a word about the genocide, about what she witnessed when she was 7 years old and had to flee her home country, had to go to Syria to rebuild her life, and then to Canada. So she becomes obsessed with these silences, and she decides to go to Turkey. So formerly, the Armenian genocide took place in 1915 in the Ottoman Empire, and now Turkey. So it takes place in Anatolia, which is Western or historically Western Armenia. So she decides to go to Turkey, to go to the hometown of her grandmother, where she never been before, and where her grandmother never went back, and try to discover what was underneath all these silences, and how she can reconstruct a memory that has been erased, and how she can transform this memory of something tragic into something into a source of hope. So it's not really you could say that it's a story about Armenian genocide, but it's I wouldn't say it's a novel about the Armenian genocide. It's more a story about memory transmission. I wanted to explore identity, exile, courage, resilience, and all these themes through the eyes of women, because the Armenian genocide is you can say that it's a story that has been forgotten, but the woman, the story of women in this genocide is really forgotten as well. It's even we don't have many stories that we can that are well known about these women. So yeah, basically this is the this is
there's definitely in the book a double forgetting. I think that Leah tries to seek out with her grandmother's stories and with the actual place as well, for sure. Thank you for that. I encourage all of you who don't have the book or haven't read it yet to grab a copy, either in French or in English or both. And I know they're for sale currently at Paragraph Bookstore. Crystal will be putting the link in the chat in a little bit. It is a story about the Armenian genocide, one of perhaps, as you say, the lesser known, though not sadly, not the least. But it's almost a story that could have been written in the voice of any number of the children or grandchildren of genocide survivors from any number of genocides in the 20th century and or 21st even, or before. And so I wonder, Phyllis and Howard, when you approached the book and the translation, I wonder what drew you to the book. Was there a historical component or a personal component that particularly hooked you, I guess, when you accepted the translation?
Not really particularly. I mean, it's a theme that really resonates with me, and just because of what's happening in the world now, and because really I know so many people who now we call it intergenerational trauma. I mean, who are suffering pain that from events that took place so long ago. It seems like it's a very a live subject still. And it's all at the same time, it's also like a personal story, happening in the present and also going back to the past. And I think that really, that makes it very poignant.
And when I read about the story, about the book, I wanted to read it right away. I got a copy at the Librairie du Square on Bernard, and I'd already read Rima's columns about which the book draws on some of Rima's own experiences with her own Téta, and talking about the Armenian genocide. So I already knew indirectly the story of the book from Rima's columns.
Yeah, it's in part. Yeah, it's a novel. It's a fiction, but it's inspired by the story of my family, in part. So it's I was inspired by my grandmother, my grandfather, who I never had the chance to meet, my great grandmother. The story I've been told. So it's a tribute to grandmother as well. This book, it's all grandmother that. And what they give to their grandchildren, striving for peace and trying to what everything that is hidden, all the love that is hidden beneath their silence.
A lot of the subjects that you treat in the book have been actually broached, as Howard's mentioned in your columns. And I wonder, initially when you began to write, was there any intention of writing a nonfiction book, or more of a memoir? I guess I wonder why the book became a novel as opposed to something more more historical, or more of a memoir of your own parcours, of your own background.
Yeah, well, it's when I began to read about the Armenian genocide. Actually, it was something that it was when it was the 100th anniversary commemoration of the Armenian genocide in 2015, and so I did some journalist work. So I went and I did some interviews. I also did the same. The quest of Leah going back to Turkey. I did that, and it was not. From the journalist point of view, it was not enough for me, because I came back with more questions, and it was I felt that just a story you write in the newspaper was not enough to convey everything that I wanted to say about this story. So there were no survivor of the genocide in my family I could talk to. I could not ask any more questions anymore. So I interviewed the few survivors in Montreal who were still alive in 2015. So people who were 100 years old and older, and I tried to put together like the personal story of the family, but which was full of holes, and the collective story that I was able to grasp here and there. So I felt that the novel would be there would be more truth in the novel than in just a personal story with full of holes.
The question, I guess the follow-up to that would be for Phyllis and Howard or Rima. Phyllis and Howard, you've translated a lot of nonfiction, often topics that are historically inflected or that could have gone both ways, that have a fair bit of research and a fair bit of what we might call veracity. But sometimes it's true, as you're saying, Rima, fiction is closer to the truth because it can stretch farther. And so I wonder for any of the three of you, I guess, how you feel about that junction between capital T truth, or the what we try to convey, those holes that we can fill with truthier truths, if I can put it that way, sometimes in fiction than we can in nonfiction. Or
I think that well, my favorite kinds of novels are novels that show precisely that how big history. Georges Perec calls history with a big H, avec la grande H, which is a wonderful pun that you can't translate into English because it means the big axe, where the brutal big history impinges on the lives of people, so that you really, that's when you really understand it, when you see people that you can, I think that you can relate to, that you can empathize with, and not as a sort of a didactic kind of exercise, but just it's just a way of seeing history that, as as you said, I think is truer, more human.
Yeah, and when there's personal stories, the kind of personal stories you get in a novel, like the little girl near the beginning of the book, there's the little girl who's the refugee from Syria, who is like seriously injured in a bombing, but now she's happy and jumping around with her friends. And that's a very touching image that you get in the book, and it's an image, and it's based on many real stories.
Yeah, and I feel as well that it's like because I'm also a journalist, I have these two hats, journalist and writer, that the journalist work, it aims at the head, and the fiction, it aims at the heart. And so this is fiction, it allows you to really make these people alive, like when you read a novel, you feel like you know them, you can you really can feel what they're feeling. And so it's, yeah, I feel there's more truth there than in just holding on to just the factual stories and nothing else.
There's a question that echoes my curiosity, that was also posed by Keith in the comment in the chat a few minutes ago, about whether you went back, and you just mentioned that you retraced Leah's steps yourself before writing the book. And so I wonder how the sense of place affected the book's development, especially because of how fraught Armenia is / Turkey / the Ottoman Empire at the time. What was it like to go back? And did you know it when you went back that you were writing a novel already, or were you just doing the interviews for La Presse, or was there a sense that the place transformed the book even back then?
I didn't know exactly. I was not sure about what I would do with this experience. I was writing for La Presse, and it was really a strange experience, because it was a painful experience in some way, because there's no it's really like this memory of this very tragic history has been really erased in the Turkish in Turkey. So there is you can meet people who will tell you about the story, but there is no cemetery, there is nowhere you can just go and put flowers or just reflect on the story. So you are like you see beautiful beautiful places, and you know everything that is behind all the horror that happened in these beautiful places. So it's really a very strange feeling. So it didn't close something for me, just like I came back with more questions and a desire to try to, I guess I tried to answer these questions by writing this novel.
Thank you. I wonder, this might be a good time.
And as I recall, you traveled there with your mother.
Yes, I did. Yeah, and that was.
And in the novel, there's a lot of bits of Arabic words and phrases, and we wanted to know how to just transcribe them into English. So and Rima's mother helped us a lot with that. It was.
Yeah. I would really, I wouldn't have been able to write this novel without my mother, because she was a really. I had so many questions because the novel it takes place. Some of it takes place in Turkey, but some of it takes place in Aleppo. So my mother was born in Aleppo. She Arabic is her mother tongue, and I had so many questions. Also my aunt Nellie, so my grandmother's sister, who is living in New York. I think she might be here tonight. So she was a great help as well, because so researching for the novel, I went to New York, and we sat down with my mother, and I asked her so many questions about what was it like to grow up as a young woman in Aleppo in the 30s, 40s. So yeah, this novel is really a collective work, like with the translator, also all the people who shared their stories and all these details that are so that are so important, that makes it lively.
It takes a village to raise a book, I guess.
Really, yes.
I wonder if this might be a good time actually to turn to the book itself. And Rima, I think you're going to read us a couple of short excerpts. There's a section about the Leah's Téta, and then later on a more a harder section emotionally, let's say. But I'll let you maybe begin with the first. You can read both in sequence. I don't know if you want to give some context or background. So here's a section from Howard and Phyllis's wonderful translation.
Yes, with great pleasure. Yeah, so the first excerpt is at the beginning, but the books it begins with the end in some way. So it's chapter 3. Let's begin at the end. Téta died today. Téta passed away in this country that had become hers, while the Syria she loved so much was dying too. She died at peace after a long, beautiful life. People go into exile to live in peace, of course, but isn't it also a little to die in peace? I still see her lighting a cigarette with a slow, graceful movement. I hear her repeating the words of Khalil Gibran. The more deeply sorrows hollows out your being, the more joy you can contain. For her, joy was only sadness without a mask. She lived 107 years, straddling 2 worlds, half of her life in the East, the other half in the West. A life like a bridge between 2 shores above raging rapids. As a child, she saw what no child should see. She could have spent her whole life crying over it. She could have nursed an undying hatred, but she clung to silence and to hope, as if she had a deep conviction that memories we don't speak of won't kill us. There are silences of denial, silences that please the murderers, murderous silences. There are others that are placed on words like stones of wisdom, silences without which any survival is impossible, that bind the pain and keep it inside. These silences appear the same, they sound totally different. Of course, she had forgotten nothing, but she refused to make us carry the burden of her painful memories. She refused to let the sediments of hatred settle in our hearts. We are our silences even more than our words. Of all stories, the one that mark us most are those that remain untold. All the ones that are best forgotten, all the ones that are revealed deep in our eyes. The memories that are too dark, the pain that is too sharp, but also the happiness that is most often silent. With death, what remains of those unsaid words? What legacy for those who will come after us? As I watched the grave diggers lower my Téta's coffin into the ground, I had the impression that they were burying the strong box of my memory before I had even found the key to it. I threw a rose on her grave. I felt a breeze on the back of my neck. I made a promise to myself. I will go to her country and delve into her memory. I will try to tell her story, because what is worse than death is forgetting. And the second excerpt, it's further on in the book, chapter 23. So it's the book's it's about Aleppo, Aleppo, where the grandmother in the novel just rebuild her life. And okay, so I'll just read it in. My Téta rarely mentioned the Aleppo where so many of her companions in misfortune had died. The Aleppo she talked about was the Aleppo of happy days, the city where her family was welcomed and protected by people who dared to defy orders. The city of Jelal Bey, the governor of Aleppo, who, listening only to his conscience, disobeyed orders and saved the lives of thousands of Armenians. The city where, after some difficult years and even during the darkest days, life went on. The Aleppo of the sellers of Fusto Halabi, pistachio nuts. There was one on the ground floor of her house. He would roast the nuts on the roof. Whenever she passed, Rose would take a handful of nuts and put them in her pocket. She spoke with nostalgia of those nights when the moon was full and she would lie on the grass and hear the sound of the shells cracking open. The Aleppo of the candy sellers, the one who made kakeblos, those fingers of almond and pistachio paste typical of the city. The Aleppo where they would sleep on the veranda in summer, on bedding that was rolled up in the morning. Khalo Abdel, a scorpion expert, would come and inspect the area if necessary, bringing something to kill the poisonous creatures. The Aleppo that permitted her to go to school beside the boys, even in time when that wasn't done. The Aleppo where the house always smelled of fresh bread. Freedom-loving Aleppo, the city of strong women, where the voices of Asmahan and Kulsum rang out. In my hotel room, reading the accounts of diplomats who witnessed the Armenians' arrival in Aleppo, I understood the reasons why my grandmother preferred to filter her memories to extract only the sweetest ones. I understood that she didn't want to relive that Aleppo that stank of death. I understood that despair was a luxury she couldn't allow herself.
Thank you. What a moving book. There's a comment that just popped up in the chat from Carolyn, says I was very moved by this novel because it made me reflect on many untold stories of people who've been moving on. And there's a sense that the book in some sense is a palimpsest, I think, that we, for example, you read the sections about Aleppo, which was at the time a place of solace and shelter. and you realize the extent to which it no longer is, and how much we long for that kind of prelapse area in Aleppo, hopefully in our lifetimes. And so there's a sense that this book is about, small H history, but it's not far away at all, unfortunately.
No, especially now with what's going on right now in Ukraine. It's an ongoing story.
Always.
Well,
go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say that we were confronted with that all the time, really, because we would look up a street name or a monument or a place, and we would discover that it no longer existed. It just brought it home very, very, very powerfully to us that the effects of what was going on there, it was like palpable.
And it was striking at the end, given current events, that Leah encounters in the cemetery, encounters a woman from Ukraine.
Yeah. I just
Ukrainian section.
I just reread that and I said, oh, that's a coincidence that struck me.
You're unfortunately prophetic. I'm glad you brought that up, Phyllis. You mentioned also, Howard, earlier, some of the Arabic phrases, and I wonder, it's not an easy book to read. It's a beautiful book to read, but it's often quite it lays you bare as a human being. And so I wonder if there were any challenges for both of you in translating it, either in difficult scenes or in sections that were harder, or in some of the more technical challenges that you've mentioned, for example, with language or with place names or sort of historical erasure, that kind of thing.
Well, we're used to doing research for like the nonfiction books we do. We always need to do research for novels too. But and the language aspect, well, I'm kind of a language nut, so I was happy to try to delve into the Arabic, trying to figure out how things were written in Arabic that were written in a French transcription in the book, but then I had, I needed a lot of help with that with Rima's mother. She was wonderful.
Yeah, well, I think Howard's Arabic is better than mine, actually. That's and my mother was really impressed by the question he asked, and he said, "Oh wow, he's really taking this job really seriously, and he did a great job." I read some passages with the Arabic translation, and she was wow, so good job.
Some
Was there any
people,
section that you found? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that some people have asked us, seeing that, there are some very painful things in the book, how it was to translate those. And something happens when I'm translating that I don't know, I'm just like I'm engaged on a different level. It's an intellectual thing. And then I have to say, when I read the book over, so there were parts of this book that I read over that I actually wept, but they didn't affect me at all when I was translating them. It's like a different part of your brain or something. It's just a sort of interesting phenomenon.
Well,
That's interesting.
The translator we know, we said the same thing, that she says she can translate books that are too hard for her to read.
You're not translating as a reader, you're translating somehow as it's an out of heart experience. It's, as you were saying, there's the heart and the brain division.
I guess, but I mean, when you read it over again, then you feel it. And hearing Rima read those excerpts, I found them very moving.
Well, I was thrilled I feel really privileged to have Phyllis and Howard translating the book, because I knew them first. They are my neighbors, actually. We live in Montreal, in my land, on the same street too. And so but I also knew that they were a really good translator, award-winning translators. So when they told me at Boreal that Howard and Phyllis, they they will translate your book. I felt really honored and privileged. Yeah.
I didn't know you were neighbors, so we could have done this event not only en présentiel in person, but in your living room.
Really, yeah, we could have, yeah.
I found that one curiosity that people often have.
Go.
Go ahead, no. I was going to say one curiosity that people often have is how translations go about being established, or how, you know, and in this case, I wonder who approached whom. So Howard and Phyllis, did you pitch the book to Moenzi, or did Boreal approach them, or who's I guess who was the first reader?
Nurjahan proposed the book to us, and we were delighted to do it. So there's not much of a story there, but it was we were just so happy to have, you don't always get that lucky.
Yeah, I will
like it was a really good
here.
fit.
Sorry, I will interject here to say that Boreal approached us with this project to ask, whether we would be interested in having it translated. So we sent it to the translators for them to review it, and they said, they would love to translate it. And so then we signed, we went ahead and signed with Boreal, and we applied for funds from Canada Council, and we signed on the translators, and that's how it came about.
Congratulations to all three of you and to Moenzi. It's a really beautiful book.
Thank you.
Phyllis, I'm not sure if you were going to say something or redirect, perhaps. I was going to open up to questions in the audience, but if you'd like to jump in first, go ahead.
Well, I had a question that intrigued me because, it's been a while since we translated the book, and so I was actually rereading it. And it's so interesting because different things jumped out at me. But one thing made me want to ask Rima a question, and that is, you start the book with a little story of a young man who has this delusion. He thinks he's got a jug on his head, and no one can convince him that he doesn't. And then you say, Leah says, there are days when I feel like that melancholy boy with his imaginary jug. There's no point telling me the jug doesn't exist. It's better to smash it to pieces. I wanted to know, like, what is the jug that's on Leah's head?
Well, it's Leah. She has very beautiful memories of her grandmother. It's essentially very memories that deal with pastries, with the smell of the klicha, this Armenian and Syrian bread she would make, the kakeblos, all these delights she would prepare, the smell of coffee, the nights watching hockey games. So it was everything about her grandmother was really nice, peaceful, and pleasing. And at the same time, she feels that there is this tragic story behind her silences, that even though the story was never really told, or we never talked about it, it's still there. It's like it's something that is there, and she doesn't know how to deal with it. So I used this metaphor just to try to convey this strange feeling of having this something really heavy and in your history, but at the same time being living a very peaceful and happy life.
Thank you.
That anecdote, I think, is worth the price of admission, if I may. So it's a great metaphor, and I think it's interesting that what Phyllis was referring to is this anecdote that I think Leah's Téta tells her about this madman, alleged madman, who imagines he has a jug on his head. Oh, sorry. I'm sure someone has a. Does someone have a mic on?
Yeah, I've got a mic on.
Or sorry, if someone's not muted in the audience. Sorry. All right. I know what I was going to say. So this madman imagines he has a jug on his head, and as you were saying, Rima, it's a metaphor for all the things that we carry. But ultimately, what allows him to release that pain and that burden is when somebody believes him, is when somebody listens and someone takes on and doesn't just say, there's nothing there, it's all in your head. Of course, it's all in his head, but it has to be in all of our heads for it to be kind of broken off of his, if I can put it that way. So I thought it was a beautiful metaphor for the way trauma, intergenerational trauma and genocide can be never lightened but carried collectively. I think.
And you explain it beautifully. Yeah, thank you for that.
I didn't have to write it, so you wrote it beautifully and translated it beautifully. I know there's quite a few people in the audience. I'm going to just do a little scan. I'm going to open up my my gallery here so I can see hands if they go up. So if you have a question and you'd like to pose it, yes, of course. So I can see one hand, or you can also write them in the chat if you'd like to. So why don't we ask Keith? You have a question, Keith Garbian, and then
I just want to make two observations, because I'm half Armenian myself, and my father was a survivor of the genocide, but he died a long time ago. I think 1995 it was that he died, in his 80s. And I've written about it in several books, including my memoir, Pain, Journeys Around My Parents, which came out in 2000, and which is incorporated in my forthcoming autobiography next year, Pieces of Myself. It occurs to me, as an Armenian, I'm very familiar with Jewish history, and in fact, I have Jewish relatives in my family. And of course, seeing what's happening with Ukrainians today, we're all part of someone else's story. We don't just have one story, we have multiple stories, just as we have multiple selves in terms of identity. It seems to me that genocide, and I think all genocides, are obscene attempts to kill memory and therefore enforce silence. And it's I like that metaphor that Rima uses in her novel. I haven't read the novel, but listening to this discussion, it's fascinating, because I've noticed that in myself. My father would never have been able to read my books because he was orphaned before he was 5 years of age, so he had no formal education, really. And it was in a different language anyway. He learned English from the British, as it turned out, when he ended up in Basra, Iraq. I have that sense of cross-generational and cross-cultural trauma, because I remember some stories from my father, whatever little that, you talk about gaps, there were lots of gaps, it's true. Because what do you remember at 5 or even less than 5, But there's one story that he told me about losing one of his young sisters. He had 2 younger sisters, 1 older sister. And this young sister, I think, was 3 years of age. And the mother was still alive at that point. The father had long been killed by the Turks. And they left her, they were starving and desperate, and they left her under a tree. And she was crying. And they said, don't worry, we'll come back for you. And of course, they never saw her again. And to this day, even though I heard this story ages ago, whenever I think about it, it traumatizes me, And I have this inexplicable kind of melancholy yearning, and I don't quite know for what. I've only been to Armenia once, back in 2013 for a conference. But I saw, in that short time I was there, I was only there for a little more than a week, I saw more of that country than my father ever had, because he had to flee, with his mother and older sister. How he survived is a miracle. And what he became in surviving is another miracle, He rose to the position of a vice president of a car company in Bombay. And that's another story, how he got there. And I still don't know all the details. But why do I have that yearning? And what is the yearning expressing? I mean, I don't speak Armenian, I don't read Armenian, I don't understand Armenian, except in translation. So why do I have that yearning? Is it an attempt, a metaphysical attempt to erase some of that silence? to find some sort of justification for feeling that I'm human in spite of this obscenity, this historical obscenity. You know, my father must have felt some guilt for having been a survivor. Jews have often spoken about this, how some of them felt guilty for having survived what their fellow beings could not. Maybe it's linked to that. I don't know, maybe Rima has some answers for that, or anybody else.
Yeah, well, I think that yes, people were killed with the genocide, and silence is another way of killing them second time. So that's why when we keep these memory alive, it's a way of, it's a kind of resistance. It's a way to, it's how we can pay tribute to the survivor, to these people who allows us today to live in peace. So I think that there's something, yeah, it's a kind of, that's all we have. It's memory. It's resistance. If it's not acknowledged, if Turkey is still denying the fact that this happened, these people were killed just because they were Armenians. If their story is this, if on top of that the stories are forgotten and untold, well, it's it's like another way of killing them. So I guess it's a good thing, this this yearning, this even though it's very hard to make a sense of it and to put the right words on it and to understand it, but it's I think it's a way to pay tribute in a way to the survivors and their courage.
You have that great line in the book that Turkey is a country built on forgetting. I think this the answer to that question, perhaps. I think.
Yeah.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Rima. I think Huda, you had a question also. Did you want to ask something? You're on mute, Huda. You'll have to unmute yourself. Here, can I unmute you? Huda, we can't hear you, unfortunately. Are you able to unmute yourself? Okay.
Sorry,
okay. Huda is trying to sort out her
okay,
mute.
we did.
Oh, there you go. We got it. There you go.
Sorry about that. But first, I want to congratulate. Can you hear me all? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes,
there's a bit of an echo.
echo.
Perhaps if those who are speaking could turn off their mics so we can hear Huda.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead. Perfect.
You're doing a great job, by the way. Rima, congratulations. I am so proud of you. I'm really proud of you. Phyllis and Howard, thank you for a beautiful job. I was amazed how well the translation was done. I was struggling because my French is very weak, so I was waiting. When is it going to be translated? So thank you for doing a great job. But guess what? It was a page turner. Rima, I stayed up for that until 3 o'clock in the morning to finish that book. And I said, it was really so well written. And Howard and Phyllis, it was so smooth. It was perfect. In my mind, I had to read it over and over again. And I took 2 pages of notes. I studied your book, Rima. I did not read it, I studied it, okay? And the other thing is the imagery was so beautiful. I had to reread some, and I am from Aleppo, I was born in Aleppo. So you brought the smells, you brought the feeling, you brought me to my childhood. And on top of it, guess what? My name, Huda, was in the book. So to me, nobody's name is Huda. And I said, wow, there is Huda in the book. So I read it and I read it again. So thank you for that. The other thing is, I feel very strongly, I made the libraries of Long Island. I live on Long Island in New York, and I made the libraries to buy the book, because I do feel, and if we all can do that, for the children who are passing those sections, to pick it up and read it. It's a nice read. I think I wish that more public schools or libraries would buy the book and leave it for children to read it, not just in bookstores. That's one thing. I'll end up by saying, at the end of the book, I was looking, Rima, for a recipe for klicha. It's like, I want to go make it. So I'm hoping, I'm asking around. That's something I was hoping at the end I could find it and go and cook it. And as a grandmother, as a new grandmother, you were right when you said, Rima, that we give love through silence. And I could relate to that. And I applaud you, Rima, for taking this and doing your part. If everybody does their part to remember what happened, their lives would have been worthwhile. So thank you. Thank you for all the translation, and thank you for including me. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Huda. I'm really touched by your comment, and I promise to have a klicha recipe in the next novel, maybe.
It's good.
Just put it here in the comments. We're all waiting.
I would have to ask my mother. Okay, let me get back to you.
Yeah,
what a wonderful testimonial. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, there's lots of wonderful food imagery in there in the book that makes your mouth water. You can almost smell the Aleppo.
Did you have to taste anything while you were translating just to make sure you got it right? Was there a culinary component of the translation process?
Well, we didn't get a chance until yesterday when Rima brought us some cacablos.
Yeah, my mother wasn't proud of me because I told her, oh, I'm going to read an excerpt and we talk about cacablos, and she told me, did you give Phyllis and Howard cacablos? And no, I forgot. I said, how dare you? So we brought them some cacablos that we can find in Montreal. So they fact checked after doing the translation, but I guess it's okay.
If there's a second edition, we can include the recipe and perhaps any annotations in there.
Of course.
Perhaps that's a good note to end on. Is there anyone else who has any other questions they'd like to raise or comments? Now would be the time to do it either in the comments or by raising your hand virtually or for real. I'm looking around. In that case, perhaps. Are there any questions? In that case, perhaps I'll hand it back to Nurjahan. And before I do, I want to thank Rima, Phyllis, and Howard for allowing me to have this conversation with you. It's a real privilege.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Katia. It's a real privilege for me too.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all so much for such an interesting conversation. And Katia, you were just magnificent as a moderator. I really appreciate your work. Thank you so much. Thank you all, and thank you to the audience for attending this evening.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you for being there, and I hope you like the book.
The link is in the chat, by the way, for those of you who haven't had a chance to click on it. So maybe we can leave the chat open for just a couple of more minutes while people are leaving the meeting. Definitely click on it, and definitely, I mean, I don't say this lightly. This is a book that you have to read.
Can we say a little bit afterwards? Can we speak for a few minutes afterwards, or it has
I think
to
so.
end?
Yeah, I think. No. I think we can stay for a few minutes. We might end the live stream at 8, or I'm not sure, Nurjahan, how you want to handle that. But we can pretend this is a real lunch and just hang out and snack on.
She wants her klicha recipe, I think.
No, it's not that, Rima. Rima, you cannot imagine. I'm just going to say quickly, Howard and Phyllis, you cannot imagine from New York. All the Rima has such a reputation with the press, and I keep on seeing columns, and everybody is telling me, you should read her column, and there's nobody to translate the column to me. I want to see, I wish that all her columns would be translated into English into a book. And the translation was so smooth that I feel that I was left out until Manam came into the picture. So now I am part of it. So thank you for doing that. But it's almost like I'm thirsting for more. What else is Rima going to create or has created? And especially when I realized that she had won the award for Pas envie d'être arabe. It's like, I want to read it. I want to translate it, whatever it is, and read it. So I guess I'll do my research, but thank you anyway. And I'm looking for the future for more of your writing and your, it's beautiful work. Thank you so much, Rima. And that's all I'm gonna say. Thank you for the time to give me.
Thank you, Huda.
Howard and Phyllis, I hope you're taking notes about subsequent possible, well, not sequels, but other books of hers that will have to appear in English.
Yes.
Do we
Well,
know
columns,
this?
yes. Well, columns are usually about something current, so it's you know, it's not something that usually it's not something that you
ages well, yeah.
put into a book and translate.
Write another book, Rima.
Although there is a collection of her of her columns.
But not in English, are there?
No, not in English, no.
I feel left out. I just feel left out. I don't know why. But anyway, I think I don't know if I am a mother of a psychiatrist, and I just want to make a point, Rima, about that column with the jar on whoever's head it was on. We all are carrying jars, and it's amazing the imagery. There were excerpts that I had to read and reread to absorb, and there is depth to them. And it's amazing how many of us are walking around with jars, and we want someone to say, we'll get rid of it somehow. And sometimes that you touch that as a mother of a psychiatrist and a psychotherapist, I could relate to that. I was so happy, it intrigued me, and you gripped my attention so many times in so many ways that it was a page turner. So after reading so many books, I said, what's happening? How come she was able to link one chapter after the other? And I was interested to see the way you did it, Rima, is that I had to go back and say, wait a minute, I need the end of that story. There was a beautiful flow to it. And I cannot congratulate you again more. I really, Rima, it was one of the best books I read.
Well, thank you. I'm really, I'm really happy you liked it, and I'll try to work on another novel, so to give you more.
Thank you. That's all I'm going to say. I feel bad. I'm taking too much of it. I'm excited. If you can feel the excitement in my voice, I'm excited. And you did great.
There's also a comment in the chat. I'm not sure if Rima, if you're following. Someone says the segment about the lipstick and the mirror was extraordinarily touching.
Oh, it was me.
Thank you.
I thought that was just so amazing.
Go ahead, Sally.
Thank you.
I was just saying, I thought that was absolutely amazing. It was just the most profound imagery, and just you can feel like you're walking through the home and looking at the actual lipstick and mirror and everything. And it was just very poignantly stated. So great job. Great job all around, but I just love that particular paragraph so much.
Well, thank you.
So I think we will leave it there for this evening. Crystal has just posted the link against Paragraph Books, so click on that before the Zoom disappears and grab your copy in English at Paragraph Books, and otherwise the Boreal copy of the French original version is also widely available in your local independent bookstore. Thank you all so much for coming this evening. Bonne lecture.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.